guys, this is the Fat Panda, and I have for you the first power rankings for the WPF Season 6. We just finished up the draft a little while ago, and I've been looking over the teams and going over my thoughts for everyone, and figured I may as well drop a power rankings for you before the season gets off. Gets off, huh? Yeah, know what? I'm not going to do any retakes this time, so that stays. I figure you all are fresh-faced and hopeful and got stars in your eyes thinking this is your season. So I figure I may as well go through and tell you guys which of you have a chance and which of you just really, really don't right now. That way, you know, if I rank you 13 and you make the finals, you can just laugh at me all off season and tell me that my rankings are garbage. And I'm fine with that. Guess we might as well just hop right into it and start disappointing some people. At number 1, I have the Sacramento Kingler with what I think is the strongest draft of the season so far. I mean, when you just look at that, everything clicks. It's got a really good fire, water, grass core. It's got basically every typing. I'm sure there's something missing other than normal, and I don't really want to take the time to find out what it is. Every single pick looks like something you could bring to just about any match and expect it to do something well. The only real thing I have to say that I don't like about this team is I guess the hazard setting isn't that good. You know, Trachean is good at setting rocks, but you're not going to want to rely on it to do that. Dragalge can set toxic spikes, but it can't always come, and let's face it, it really prefers just to hold a choice specs and smack things or flip turn out of the way. But other than that, I mean, just about everything in this team looks good. It can hit hard right off the bat. It can set up and sweep you. It can grind you down with Umbreon and Rotom and stuff. So there's really nothing about this team that is bad in any way, shape, or form. Easily, I think, deserving of the number 1 slot for the season right now. At number 2, I have the West Texas Weaviles, who are mostly riding high off their high tier picks, getting extreme value out of almost every tier. G-Max Gengar is an absolute force to be feared. Jirachi and Pex are 2 of the most headache-causing mons in Tier 1. Mandibuzz is always good. Goodra is always good. Vikavolt and Vikavolt and Mudsdale are almost always good. Decidueye is fine. Raboot, I don't know what to think of it. It's got Libero now, but I don't think that makes it good. Clefairy is like the one thing where I'm basically like, why? I'd almost rather not draft a fairy than draft Clefairy. Only other thing about this team that I'm not a huge fan of is you're basically forced to run Defog Mandibuzz every week. If you want to get rid of hazards, you could technically run Defog Decidueye, but no one wants to do that, and I don't think Raboot gets court change. I think that's just Cinderace. So that's not to say Defog Mandibuzz is bad, or there's even really other moves it wants to run, but you can basically assume Mandibuzz is going to come almost every week, and that's, a downside, I guess. Oh darn, I have to bring Mandibuzz, one of my best mons. Shucks. At number 3, we have the Rochester Raboot, the lucky recipient of the number 1 overall pick, obviously taking single striker Shifu in what is probably going to be the only season it is allowed, as I'm sure there will be cries for it to be banned, maybe alongside its brother next season. So, lucky possibly being the only one of us to ever get to play with that toy. But even outside of Urshifu single strike, I mean, look at the sheer unmatched offensive power on this team. You've got Hatterini G-Max, which is a great G-Max. You have Urshifu Single Strike. You have Alolan Raichu comboed with Pincurchin so that you can take advantage of double speed plus rising voltage. Marowak Alola generally has no real switch-ins, assuming, it gets in safely on its own. The only real thing I don't like about this team is that I think his defenses aren't amazing, especially when it's concerning electric moves. You're going to rely on Skarmory and Milotic for a lot of defensive mileage, and they're both weak to electric, and you're running electric terrain a lot, probably. Now, I mean, if you predict well, you can try to patch that up with Marowak, with Lightning Rod, or Ground-type Flygon, but they're not really defensive mons. They don't want to get bopped by coverage moves. And same like Whiscash and Shiinotic technically don't really care about electric either, but how often are you actually going to want to bring one of them? It's going to take a really specific matchup for you to point at Whiscash and be like, that is the mon that saves the day for me this week. So I think that's just a thing for him to be kind of, he got to keep an eye on it, because it could easily be where he sets a terrain and then he gets counterswept by a who knows what, running electric and ice or electric and water coverage or something, depending on the week. But, I mean, once again, if that's the flaw that I find with the team, there's really no problems with the team, is there? Also, Flygon has Scorching Sands now, which is pretty dope. So if he doesn't run Throat Spray, Scorching Sands, blah, 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 at least once, I'll be really disappointed. I think that's the first time I've ever said Flygon was dope in any fashion whatsoever. It's pretty garbage, but Scorching Sands isn't, so maybe that saves the day. At number 4, I have the Madison Machamps, the team that is coached by probably the strongest coach in the entire league, a true paragon of virtue, and just the most knowledgeable guy around, drafting, unfortunately, not the best team around. There are definitely some holes, but the sheer offensive presence, I think, will make up for it for this coach. Looking at the team, it screams, I want to run rain, which is fairly accurate. Picking up Pelipper, Barraskewda, and Kingdra. Those are basically the 3 best rain mons you're going to get in Galar decks right now. Adding in things that also don't really mind the rain. Pikachu, I mean, I guess it's fine in the rain. It also can set up the rain itself if it has to with Surf. Volcarona, despite being a fire type, doesn't really mind the rain. Hurricane and such is really good. There's also another little speedy combo with Indeedee and Unburdened Drifblim, although Drifblim lacks the offensive presence to really be a threat. It could really use Swords Dance or Bulk Up or something. Downsides for this team, Chansey is basically 90% of the bulk this team has. You can run Fat Pelipper, Fat Klefki. You can try to run a defensive Drifblim. None of them are ideal. And so while Chansey is one of the better defensive mons, especially with Teleport now, it's a lot of slack that it's going to have to pick up. Other downside, there really is no way for this team to deal with strong electric attackers. Pikachu's immune. Chansey, once again, doesn't really care about special offensive electric attackers. And, I mean, to be honest, it doesn't really care about physical electric attackers either, because usually their electric attacks are pretty weak. But it's definitely something to be concerned about, because if your only actual immunity is Pikachu, there could very well be problems. But overall, the team, essentially nothing is a wasted pick. Everything has a specific role on the team, and it's cohesive essentially. At number 5, we have the Hekseville Ho-Oh, halfway through their rebranding, still missing a logo, but I figure the April Fool's Ho-Oh is probably good enough. The team itself is quite strong at the top end. I mean, Cinderace Dragapult is a very, very good offensive presence. Sylveon, Slowbro, Eldegoss form a fantastic defensive core. There's regen core. Sylveon can wish pass. Works out pretty well. As far as I can see, only Crocodile has any hazards whatsoever. And I mean, since Boots came out, technically hazards aren't as important, especially rocks. I'd actually argue that spikes are now better than rocks most of the time. But only having one hazard setter and that hazard be rocks, I think that will cause issues in times. It's hard to grind down an opposing team without hazards. And neither Cinderace or Dragapult are true wall breaking. They don't just come out and blow you away for the most part. They prefer to kind of clean. So there's really no true wall breaker on this team, which I guess is the downside. At number 6, I have the Vegas Golden Magnemites, hyping up one of the better regen cores we're going to see in the league with Tangrowth and Slowking. Couldn't quite get Slowbro, was just a couple picks away from picking it, but for the rest of us, we thank you for taking Slowking instead of getting Slowbro. Otherwise, I mean, this team is just super balanced. It can hit you just about every way, in just about every style. I'd argue that it's a little weak. There's not a lot of, or I should say the special offensive suite is kind of weak. Zeraora isn't a specialist. Slowking can, but he's going to have to be run defensive a lot. Gardevoir is obviously the premier special attacker on the team, which I guess is really kind of where the problem is. If Gardevoir is your premier offensive special attacker, but I mean, even then, the team is still really, really good. I kind of wish there was something in the speed tier between Scyther and Zeraora. 105 to 143 is a really, really big gap where a lot of things are going to sit. So he's going to be forced to do things like run Scarf Gardevoir or Scarf Darmanitan a lot. But that's, I guess, not truly a problem. Otherwise, I mean, I guess once again it comes down to hazards. Hazard removal is Scyther and Hitmonchan, neither of which are things you're going to want to bring every week, or in Scyther's case, ever run Defog on. And hazard setting, you've got Copperajah for rocks and Drapion for T-Spikes. I really think people should start trying to prioritize Spikers more. I really do think that's the way going forward. Everything that's weak to rocks just likes to run Boots all the time now. So it's really, you want to lay down the Spike so you get the extra chip on steals or grounds that are coming in, or fightings that just don't run Boots ever. I really do think that should be the play for people going forward, and they should start prioritizing Spikes more. At number 7, we have the Warsaw Rapidash. This team is characterized by its just great defensive Fire, Water, Grass core. Vaporeon, Incineroar, Vileplume, very, very sick. It's got great offensive mons in Alakazam and Lycanroc Dusk. And then Mimikyu too, but we don't speak of Mimikyu. Once again, this is a team that's going to feel like it has to run Boots more because hazard removal is somewhat lacking. Noivern will often end up running Defog because Girder is rarely going to want to. But what can you do? At number 8, we have the ASU Merrills, the team with probably the strongest physical offensive presence in the entire league. Melmetal and Dracovish should never ever have been able to be paired together, and it makes trying to wall this team basically a no-go. This team is going to have most of its matches end in like under 20 turns probably, which I don't know if it's a good thing for this team, to be honest, because the problem is after going absolutely insane by picking Melmetal, Dracovish, G-Max Lapras, they kind of slowed down the offensive picks. Obstagoon is fine, Roserade is fine, Togekiss is fine offensively. Webs I can kind of understand for Dracovish or Obstagoon. It's just some of the last picks. The Magneton, Crustle doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it makes sense in that it's their only rocker, which is another story. But it's just a bad mod. It's a bad Smash mod. I think Barbaracle would have been a significantly stronger choice, even if you're doubling up on the physical water with Dracovish. The rocks and this other stuff would have made up for it. Ditto feels like a confused pick for this team, I think. Ditto is often kind of like the counter sweeper. You make it so your opponent either A, can't set up at all because they're scared they'll be counterswept, or B, if they do set up, it's so that they can't beat themselves with mons. The problem is Ditto is going to have less of a presence with this team specifically because the opponent is never going to be able to do that. You're never going to be able to set up or do anything like that in the face of Dracovish or Melmetal or Thunderwave Togekiss or Obstagoon. It just can't happen. So Ditto will have often less of a role on this team than it would on many others because the safety net that it offers isn't really needed here. Number 9, we have the Melbourne Lucarios, the team that has decided to take upon itself the curse of G-Max El Creamy, which has never won a match at all. It has gone 0 and whatever every single time it's come, it's lost. Very, very sad for it. But I mean, outside of that, you've got quite strong cores here. Corviknight, Rotom, Komo-o, Seismitoad. I mean, those are just like the staples of staples of staples for just kind of bulk. Not necessarily walls for the most part, but they're bulk with purpose, I guess is the way to put it. I don't know about Seismitoad and Rotom together, but whatever. Other than that, I mean, this team is just like the epitome of just like balanced. It doesn't veer too hard into defense. It doesn't veer that hard into offense. It's just kind of there, which may end up working out. It might have a lot of grinding games. Sometimes they'll get KOs with they'll just get surprise wins with Sword Sandseeker B or Nasty Plot, Salazzle, or Home Claws Durant or something. But it doesn't really, it just kind of felt like it stayed safe almost. It just took a middle of the road path, which means it's not like terribly impressive, but it's gonna rely entirely upon how its coach pilots it. Some teams are somewhat brain dead, and you feel like anyone could just grab some mods from it and win. This one is not one of those cases because you're going to have to pick your specific matches and battles very carefully, which might end up causing more losses than they'd like. At number 10, I have the Minnesota Lycanrocs, who have G-Max, Corviknight, and Clefable, which is absolute cancer. And this is coming from someone who drafted Chansey. But outside of that, there's not a lot on this team that really makes me go, wow. They took Politoed. It looks like they're trying to get some sort of rain thing going, but Toxicroak and Ludicolo and Heliolisk and kind of Charizard are just not the way for rain, I don't think. And I think they'll be disappointed more often than not. Offensively, this team also it's kind of like middling. It's not great. all these mons are going to need, like, they have to run specs, or they have to run setup, or they're just not really going to make a dent in anything. You know, you don't have anything that can really run a scarf and just blow through its opponents. You know, if the closest is probably like Charizard with Hurricane in the Rain, which is fine, I guess. It'd be interesting to see. But yeah, there's not a lot of just like straight out of the box power, which might cause problems in the long run. At number 11, we have the South Beach Shaymin with G-Max Flapple of all mons. G-Max Flapple is quite interesting in that it's, you know, got Dragon Dance, it's got Hustle, which means, you know, high power, high risk. But when it's G-Maxed, of course, it won't miss, but it still gets the Hustle bonus. So it's one of those things that could be really, really interesting to try and could be really, really good. Or he could G-Max, get a KO, and then miss every other attack and lose horribly. Really don't know how it's going to go. But, I mean, the rest of the team, there's a lot of really good stuff here. Amoonguss, Gastrodon, Bronzong, kind of Silvally, kind of Rotom. There's a lot of good like defensive things there. They've got a lot of ways to sponge attacks. Between Cinderace, Flapple, they have a lot of really high risk offense too. High jump kick, Hustle, Porygon Z if it's running adaptability has to, or Porygon Z is also really high risk, but mostly in the prep area, to be honest. You know, whether or not you can afford to run an adaptability with TRI attack or Hyper Beam, or if you have to run like a setup set, but it's not very bulky for setup. There's just like a lot of high risk for the actual damaging. If South Beach can play it well and can, you know, prep well, this team could be really, really, really good. But it's also really, really risky. And that could also easily be their downfall. At number 12, we have the Boston Red Sox. This is Rillaboom and Mew. It's going to be the Rillaboom and Mew show a lot. They're very, very good. Rillaboom is very, very strong, but also doesn't have a lot of different things it can do, especially since it's not G-Max. Mew is really, really strong, but that's because it can do literally anything. So it'll be really fun to watch. I think teams with Mew are often the ones where the most has to be done in prep, because if you build like your Mew wrong, I mean, then you just basically threw away an entire mon half the time. When I look at this team, I feel like outside of Rillaboom and Mew and, you know, like Magnezone and Comfey are like fine. It's kind of like I'm just looking at the expendables. Nothing here like matters. It can all work quite well, but nothing like no one would see this team and be like, "Damn, that's a good team." But yet I could still see this team also ripping off 8 wins this season, just because there's like a lot of things here that kind of work. So I don't really know how to go with this team. I'm more down on it just because of the individual members, but it could be really good with the right prep and the right coach. Number 13, I have the Alanta Beedrilles. Team is full of basically individually very strong Pokemon. Gyarados is great, Kyurem is great, Mamoswine is great, Galvantula is great, Porygon's great, Beware is great, etc. It just feels like there isn't really a lot of cohesion here. I can't really see what the plan for this team is for the most part. What is the purpose of Mega Venus, or not Mega, I wish. What is the purpose of G-Max Venusaur here? There's no Sun. It's not like Mega Venusaur where it gains bulk when it's, it gains bulk when it's G-Max, but it's only 3 turns. I just don't really feel like it's got a place. I feel like drafting G-Max Venusaur, which I believe was done literally in round 1, should have been followed up by a Torkoal or Ninetales or something. Like that Heatmore slot should be Ninetales and one of the other tier 4s should be a tier 5 of some sort instead, I feel. Because, or some points, like, there needed to be something like that on this team. Webs are really good for them because they've got a lot of meh speed offense. The only thing over base 100 for this team is Galvantula, which is really, really bad in the long run. It's going to require scarfs or webs every week. It's going to just, people are going to be able to cut a lot of speed in their matches and bring in extra bulk, which will be a problem. And I mean, the other thing that I note is that the bulk on this team has a serious, serious problem. All of the bulk is basically weak to fighting, except El Creamy or defensive Gyarados. Because those are really the only two basically viable defensive mons that don't just die to close combat. I don't count Venusaur because, once again, it's not Mega, so it doesn't really have bulk. If you want a G-Max to eat up some fighting hits, by all means, go ahead. But I think that's an issue that is absolutely going to have to be addressed unless they are actually dedicated to basically bringing in Alchemy every week, which could happen, but shouldn't. So I'd try to find something, even just like a Ghost, which, you know, every fighting mon is knockoff or whatever, but just something so I can't just sit down and slap close combat over and over and over and over again, especially in a division with a lot of really good fighting types. At number 14, we have the Half Moon Hydreigon. This team has kind of just like ASU, they have a significant amount of offensive presence. But this team, instead of being strong out of the gate with things like Melmetal and whatnot, they're going to rely heavily on setup. Outside of setup, I mean, you can run some offense like Toxtricity or Hydreigon or Hexorus can just be offensive out of the gate, but they're still often better when they can set up, either like a Swords Dance or a Nasty Plotters, whatever. Toxtricity is probably the exclusion to that because Shift Gear is kind of meh. But on GMAX, Shift Gear is a lot better than it is on a regular, so still good. But yeah, everything on this team wants to set up. That's kind of why you see Ninetales Alola there. You've got to have Veil if you're going to be this hard into setting up. So either Ninetales or GMAX Lapras was necessary. Yeah. Another problem, I don't like the bulk on this team at all. Like, if you look at bulk, you're looking at Whimsicott, Weezing, Lapras, and Hydreigon. Necrozma is probably the only like thing that I see that I'd be like, bulk, yes. I mean, Weezing's good in bulky, but unless you're running Pain Split, it's going to die fairly quickly. If you ran Wish, it'd be fine, but he doesn't have a Wisher. He has Healing Wish, but, you know, killing something to heal Weezing is not a play that most people would want to make. But yeah, this team is basically going to be like, I have to get up rocks with Necrozma or Dugtrio. Then I have to get up Veil with Ninetales. And then I have to pray that my opponent decided to just not bring Defog this week. Because probably, you know, or that they don't have Roar or something. Because if they get through the rocks and the hail and you can't set up, you're going to lose a lot of matches. But if he can get the setup going, you know, basically any of these mons can, once they set up, once they're going to just do some significant damage. So it might just be a setup, power away till you die, setup, power away till you die, just hope that's enough kind of team, which it may be. At number 15, I have the Bolton Boldores, which are the tale of two teams. They started out by drafting pretty heavy into Sand, and then finished by drafting fairly heavy into Sun. I kind of like understand where they're going with the like, will they, won't they, will I run Sand, will I run Sun, if you guess wrong, you basically lose kind of play. But I feel in the long run, this is the incorrect way to draft. I think if you're going to do something, you should go all in on it and just overwhelm the opponent, because now you have a team where 2 or 3 mons on each side just can't play with the others. So all you've actually done is decrease the amount of viable teams that you can make. You know, if you're going to run Sand, Venusaur is not coming. Torkoal, of course, would not be coming. If you're running Sun, Gigalith probably isn't coming. Golisopod and Jellicent will be worse. It just, it's going to actually decrease the amount of teams and the amount of variability that this team can run, which actually makes it almost easier to prep for. So I think this plan is probably going to be a backfire on Bolton, and I would probably recommend to them to ditch one or the other with their trades. And even if it's not like, you don't have to like ditch the Sand and then be like, okay, I'll get more Sun attackers. Just get more things that work with the Sun, or get more things that work with the Sand, because the way it is right now, I don't think is the way. And bringing up the rear, we have number 16, the GWS Gladiators. This team is going to be carried hard by Urshifu, Rapid Strike, and Hawlucha. The problem with that is that they are both fighting types. They're also both weak to electric. There are going to be significant problems when Urshifu is made actively worse by the presence of Hawlucha and Inteleon G-Max on the team. And Hawlucha is made actively worse by the presence of Urshifu. And Inteleon is made, it's a problem. They're all weak to the same damn things, and they don't differentiate enough from each other. So there's going to be real problems where just by prepping for one or two of those, you're almost prepped for all three. And that just makes it significantly easier to prep for and handle this team. The other problem I see here is that it just looks like a confused team. There's lots of things that just don't fit. Low value picks for their tiers. Bolton is not that good. Tier 3 was actually a mistake. I probably should have made it Tier 4. Arctozolt, until it gets Slush Rush, it is very, very bad. Thwackey is not good. I don't get the Thwackey pick. I don't see the purpose of it on this team. Terrain for Lucha, you have Wheezing. Extra damage for Serena, what's the point? Turtonator is interesting, but it's not really going to sweep anything because Shell Smash, you have to almost get 2 off to even have a chance. And, maybe it can do some things, maybe it can't. Lycanroc is very nice. Wheezing G is very nice. Serena does good things. I just think that this is going to be a confused, muddled team that is going to struggle to win many matches at all. All right, I think I've rambled on for long enough. Here is just a quick list. You can take a look and see where the teams are, or you can just skip to this point if you don't care about all my talking and see what this is and then get offended because I've placed your team too low, or my rankings aren't the same as your rankings, or whatever gripe you have with me. Feel free to hit me with it in the Discord because I know you will regardless. That's all I've got for you this week. I will possibly have a post-week one. I don't know how often I'm going to do these because I don't know if I'm going to also be doing the Magikarp League. If I am doing both, it'll probably be bi-weekly, so maybe you won't see me again until week 2. But I don't know. Post-week 1, post-week 2, something like that. Don't know which. I'll see you guys then.